Power doesn't fall to speeches. It falls to humiliation. Right now, dictators aren't listening to lofty promises about freedom. They're watching a single battlefield, hunting for weakness, calculating their own survival. And if what they see is hesitation instead of destruction, the message couldn't be clearer. The system still holds. Fear still governs. That's why what comes next isn't symbolic. It's decisive. And as Peter Zeihan argues, Ukraine isn't just fighting over territory. It's testing whether authoritarian power itself can still endure.
They need to see the Russians not just humbled, but destroyed. Autocrats are by nature hierarchical systems without a lot of support on the sides. And they are going to cherry pick whatever information they see, not just for their propaganda, but for their own internal processing. And it takes a really, really sharp hit to break through that layer of conscious distorting of reality within your own mind. And so a battlefield defeat for the Russians isn't going to change anyone's mind. But if you break the Russian system, that would.
Zeihan's warning is cold and surgical. Authoritarian regimes do not process reality the way open societies do. They filter it, distort it, and insulate themselves behind an illusion of control. A single military setback doesn't shake them. It gets rationalized, explained away, buried. But when an entire power structure fractures in public, the illusion collapses. And once that illusion shatters, every ruler who governs through fear begins to feel the ground shift beneath their feet. Zeihan wasn't warning about some distant future collapse. He was describing what happens when a system loses control of itself, when hierarchy splinters, when fear replaces discipline, and when power no longer flows downward but detonates inward. And now we move from theory to reality, from strategic diagnosis to raw footage on the ground. Because what unfolded next inside Russian ranks was not a setback or a retreat. It was chaos. In modern warfare, an army doesn't truly die when it runs out of ammunition. It dies when it loses its eyes. For a force as large and rigid as Russia's land army, blindness is not an inconvenience. It is a death sentence. That nightmare is now unfolding across the Ukrainian front, where nearly 700,000 Russian soldiers are operating in a battle space they can no longer see, no longer hear clearly, and no longer trust above them or beside them. This collapse didn't begin with infantry. It began in silence, deep inside the Slozhansky forest. On January 21st, 2 Russian air defense systems detonated almost simultaneously. These were not ordinary machines. They were the Buk M2 and the far more advanced Buk M3, systems Russian doctrine calls the guardians of the sky, each one a technological crown jewel. The Buk M3 alone is valued at roughly $45 million, packed with high-end radars designed to track aircraft, cruise missiles, and select ballistic threats. Russian commanders believed these systems were untouchable. Hidden beneath dense forest cover, shielded by winter conditions, they assumed nature itself made them invisible. But trees do not hide heat signatures. Forests do not block signals intelligence. Ukrainian reconnaissance units from the 8th Airborne Corps located the systems with chilling precision, as if the Russians had marked the targets themselves. What followed was not a battle. It was an execution. Through tightly coordinated drone guidance and artillery strikes, both systems were reduced to scrap within minutes. The explosion rising from the forest floor was more than fire. It marked the end of Russian air control in that sector. Open source estimates placed the financial loss at roughly $70 million. But the money didn't matter. What Russia lost was far more valuable: situational awareness. And once an army goes blind, panic replaces planning. 77 kilometers away, near Selnikov on the Kupiansk front, that blindness spread like a disease. With the air defense umbrella gone, Russian ground units suddenly felt exposed. Every sound in the sky became a threat. Every shadow overhead felt like death approaching. Under normal conditions, air defense systems provide constant psychological reassurance. You are covered. You are safe. When that reassurance vanished, fear took over. Soldiers began hearing drones everywhere. The panic triggered a catastrophic breakdown in coordination. According to reports relayed by Ukrainian forces, the Russian command center lost all communication between the 82nd Motorized Infantry Brigade and the 69th Motorized Infantry Division. 2 massive formations, under the same flag and mission, suddenly had no idea where the other was. Radios dissolved into chaos. Orders contradicted each other. Command chains snapped. Units maneuvered blindly. Then it happened, under extreme stress. The 1st and 3rd battalions collided during movement. Soldiers mistook friendly reconnaissance drones for Ukrainian attack drones and opened fire. When a soldier shoots down his own intelligence drone, he isn't just firing a weapon. He's tearing out his last remaining eye with his own hand. What followed was horror. In just 24 hours, a combination of friendly fire, internal confusion, and opportunistic Ukrainian strikes resulted in the loss of 70 Russian soldiers and 88 armored vehicles. These weren't casualties inflicted by a direct Ukrainian assault. Most of the damage was self-inflicted. Tanks fired on vehicles carrying their own troops. Mortars landed on friendly positions. Units attacked shadows belonging to their own army. This is the deepest form of military collapse, when fear turns inward. And this chaos isn't isolated. It's part of a far larger breakdown. To understand why an army would begin to destroy itself like this, the explanation came far from the battlefield. On January 21st, at the World Economic Forum in Davos, NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte revealed the scale of the disaster. Intelligence assessments showed Russian daily troop losses had reached 1,000 soldiers per day by December 2025. 1,000 per day. An army bleeding at that rate cannot stabilize. It can only replace bodies, and those replacements are rushed, inexperienced, untrained, and unfamiliar with both commanders and technology. They are thrown into combat without coordination, without trust, and without understanding the systems around them. A mass of people who do not know each other cannot function as an army. When the first bullet flies or the first drone buzzes overhead, instinct replaces discipline, and instinct pulls the trigger. Ukraine understands this weakness perfectly. The destruction of the Buk systems wasn't about removing missiles from the sky. It was about severing the Russian army's nervous system. By targeting expensive, complex systems, Ukraine forces Russian troops into a primitive, manual style of warfare, one far more prone to fatal mistakes. A few $1,000s worth of drones neutralize systems costing tens of millions, and replacing those systems is nearly impossible. Sanctions have choked off access to the high-end radars, semiconductors, and sensors they require. Until they're replaced, Russian forces remain blind. Blind soldiers make mistakes. Mistakes kill comrades. This is deliberate attrition. Psychological warfare. Demoralization by design. Reports from Selnikov describe wounded soldiers being abandoned, evacuation chains collapsing, morale evaporating. An army that shoots its own troops and leaves its wounded behind does not move toward victory. It eats itself. The consequences ripple outward. Satellite imagery confirms Russia has begun stripping air defenses from other regions. The Finnish border, the Far East, dragging them toward Ukraine to plug the gaps. Every explosion in a Ukrainian forest opens a permanent hole in Russia's national defense shield. Moscow is tearing windows out of distant rooms to extinguish a fire it can no longer control. The strain on the defense industry is crushing. Producing these systems isn't like refurbishing old tanks. They require precision components Russia cannot easily replace. That reality has reshaped orders on the ground. Protect the system, sacrifice the soldiers. This is why images have emerged of Russian troops firing wildly into the sky. Moscow calculates that losing hundreds of soldiers is cheaper than losing a $45 million radar. Human life is treated as renewable. Technology is not. But even that equation has limits. Ukraine's AI-driven drone swarms now make decisions faster than human reflexes. Human waves cannot outrun algorithms. The friendly fire disaster at Selnikov was an anomaly. It was a warning spasm from an organism whose central nervous system has collapsed. Behind the lines, logistics are freezing. Without air protection, convoys can only move at night, the most dangerous hours. Darkness amplifies confusion, misidentification, and ambush. Ukraine is forcing Russian logistics into shadows, slowing them, exhausting them, breaking them. And now a new danger enters the equation: foreign troops. Thousands of North Korean soldiers have reportedly been introduced to stabilize the front. But imagine injecting foreign units into an army already shooting itself. Where radios fail, trust is gone and panic rules. Language barriers under fire are lethal. Mispronounced passwords. Misunderstood commands. Accents triggering suspicion. Intelligence suggests Russian officers are already struggling to integrate these forces. A panicked Allied voice on the radio can be more terrifying than an enemy drone. Ukrainian intelligence understands this and targets the fault lines where units meet, turning translation errors into bloodshed. What exploded in the forests near Kharkiv was not just a weapon system. It may have been the final fracture of an imperial illusion, a giant, blinded, lashing out at everything around it and wounding itself in the process. This is not just a battlefield failure. It is a system collapse in real time.